Are you thinking of leaving corporate, but too afraid to make the move? Have you already escaped corporate, but are finding it hard to run your dream business? Are you wasting valuable time by attempting to figure challenges out on your own? We have created a podcast for corporate escapees running their own business. This is the Corporate Escapees Podcast by Build, Live, Give. We bring you first-hand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day as a corporate escapee. We get real with no corporate BS. And now, over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello and welcome to Corporate Escapees, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of people who are successfully running their own businesses, hearing their war stories and motivations for making the jump from their corporate gig. I'm your host, Paul Higgins, and our guest today is someone who watched his father have work-life integration before it was even a thing. They learnt great skills in corporate publishing before they made the brave jump, and finally goes through the absolute rich insights on how to self-publish and what the key benefits are. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Michael Hanrahan from Michael Hanrahan Publishing. Welcome, Michael Hanrahan from Michael Hanrahan Publishing to the Corporate Escapees podcast, brought to you by Build, Live, Give. So, Michael, we're going to get to know lots about you today, but why don't we start with something your friends or family would know about you that our listeners wouldn't?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So something that might be of particular interest given the topic of your podcast is that I actually didn't know what a 9-to-5 job was when I was a kid. So my father was a writer, which is how I ended up doing what I do. And his job was he would lock himself out in his study at the front of the house. And he would write any hours of the day. So he'd often be out there at 2:00 in the morning. He was a bit of a night owl. He'd come and go during the day just whenever he, felt like going and doing a bit of work. So that was how he made his living. So when I was younger, I'd be over at my friend's house or something, and I'd see their dads coming and going in suits off to their 9-to-5 jobs, and I didn't really know what that was all about. So that's something that a lot of people probably don't know about me.
Excellent. So you got a good view into what the future was going to look like from an early age.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I kind of always knew that, once I realized there was this sort of, 9-to-5 thing out there, I kind of knew I didn't really want to do it. So I always looked at the way my dad worked and I loved it. So I always thought I'd, kind of end up doing something on my own somehow.
Great. And tell us a little bit about, I know you started at Write Books, if LinkedIn is right.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to leave corporate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I did start at a little publishing company called Write Books. I did a writing and editing degree at university, and I got the job at Write Books out of university. Started as a trainee editor and then became editor, and then editor and what's called production coordinator, so managing the printing and that side of things. After three and a half years at Write Books, I started to look around. The good side of working at a small company is you get to learn lots of things. The bad side is there's nowhere to go. There wasn't really anywhere for me to get promoted to. So I started looking around for a corporate, a larger, more corporate publishing job. And funnily enough, at about that time, our small publishing company got taken over by one of the major publishers in Australia. So I actually didn't have to go anywhere. I pretty much stayed where I was. But everything did change a lot. It did become very corporate. We moved into their offices. We suddenly had a big management team up in Brisbane that we had to answer to and all that kind of thing. So after being there for about 3.5 years, I learned all the things I didn't want to do to run a publishing company. So I had all of the same frustrations that probably a lot of your listeners have. All the things that bother you about corporate, the not feeling you're being appropriately rewarded for your efforts, feeling like you're kind of getting promises made to you that never quite materialize, all the sort of usual frustrations that people have. The particular turning point for me was, I'd been kind of getting a little bit frustrated with all that sort of thing for a few years. And then we were leading up to the Olympics one year and I had an idea for a book. And so me and another guy in the company spent some of our own time, so after hours, working on this book concept for a book about the Olympics. And Nobody in the company was interested. They wouldn't even talk to us about it. And this is after being told, oh, we'd love to hear your ideas and you can do this and you can do that and all that kind of thing. And of course, none of that ever happens. So that was kind of the last straw for me, putting in all my own time on this book and kind of not, really having anybody pay any attention to it. So I started looking around for other jobs. I got a job interview at Penguin for pretty much the same position. So I was managing editor at the time, and this was a senior editor position at Penguin. I went for the job interview. So it was about an hour and a half interview. And I could see the minute I walked in the door at Penguin that all the things that drove me nuts at my current job were going to drive me nuts if I got the job at Penguin. And so I rang my partner, Anna, from the foyer of Penguin and said, I'm going to go and start my own business. I said, I don't care if Penguin offer me this job or not. I don't want it. I'm starting my own business. So,
and how did she take that news?
She actually was not too surprised. It was, I'd been talking for years about starting my own business. It was something that was always on the cards. So yeah, I think she could probably see the way it was going anyway. So she wasn't at all shocked to hear that.
Great. And what were some of the key fears you had the moment you made that decision?
It's definitely a nerve-wracking decision. A few of the fears I didn't have were getting work. I was actually already doing a lot of work on the side anyway, so I wasn't too concerned about getting work. I wasn't too concerned about doing the work. Like I knew I could actually, the quality of the work and that kind of thing was fine. What worried me was I actually didn't know anything about running a business at that point. So, just things like the regulations and the accounting and, getting all the right software and all that kind of thing. So I think that was probably the biggest concern I had, was more kind of the logistics of getting the thing set up.
Great. And what help did you get to get through that?
Well, I did a lot of homework. So I read, funnily enough, given what I do, I read a lot of books about it. I went and caught up with some freelance editors who I knew. So I just said, can I go and have a coffee with you? Can you tell me all about it, what I need to know? I went and got myself a business accountant for the first time ever. Just talking to a lot of people that I know who are already doing their own thing, which was absolutely a very, very big help.
Great. And it was awesome that people gave you the time. Was any particular way that you approached them? So I know a lot of people, I think it's great to learn from those that have gone before you, but what was your technique in getting time with these people who are often very busy themselves?
Just being very upfront with them. It's one thing I've found is all along my business journey is that most of the time people are really helpful and really supportive of what you're doing. So most of the time it was just literally an email out of the blue saying, hey, I'm going out on my own. You've been doing this well for the last 5-10 years, whatever it is. Can we just go and have a coffee? And so we'd go and have a coffee and I'd sit there with my notepad and, we'd just go through it and I'd ask any particular questions that I had and they'd give me some advice and they'd usually say something like, oh, make sure you do this. And so, oh, that's a fantastic idea. I hadn't thought of that. And yeah, just catching up with people and picking their brains.
Yeah, great. And I think often, people that we have in our community find it really difficult to get into corporate doors because they're in back-to-back meetings and all the things that you talked about before of why you left is often the reason why it's so hard to get to people. But I think small business people, that the world's massive and they do want to help each other. And I think that's been a massive difference I've found of running my own business versus working in corporate. It sounds like you've come across a similar thing.
Very, very much so. I think for me, there's two aspects to that. Number one, I think that's true generally of small business people. I know a lot of small business people now, especially because we work largely with small business authors. But I think for me, it's also particularly relevant in the publishing industry. I do find that publishing people they're just very generous with their time. They're all interested in producing good books, and they're kind of passionate about what they're doing. So I've found that people have been very generous and very helpful, even though some of these people you are competing directly with, once you get up and running, they've still been happy to help me out.
Excellent. Well, the next section is the build section. So when someone comes up to you, Michael, and says, what do you do for a living? How do you answer that?
So I do have kind of got the official spiel, obviously. So our pitch is we help motivated small business owners self-publish high-quality books to build their profile, promote their business, and make them stand out from the crowd. So that's my kind of official pitch. If I'm not feeling in the mood to do that, I just say generally I work in book publishing. So.
Excellent. And, how did you come about that as an ideal client or someone that you wanted to work with?
That was that specific, the specific focus we have for the business now. We've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years. I actually went and did a business development course, and it was a really, really good course. It was fantastic. And the very first day of that course, literally the whole day was spent just working out who your ideal client is and what you should be doing with your business, basically. So it was literally sitting down for the whole day, and you'd work with other people in the group and the mentor who was there on the day. So looking at what are you best at in your business? Where are your skills? Where is your experience? Who are your best clients? And that whole day, I literally came home to Anna and said, we're doing self-publishing for small business from now on. It was just, once I sat down and examined it that closely, it was just staring me in the face.
Great. And was there times when you were challenged to deviate from that and you stuck to the course? Can you remember that at the start, or was it, no, we're going to stay on that course the whole time?
Since we made that specific decision about 4 or 5 years ago, it's very much been, we've had no worries about deviating at all. We've actually been extremely busy for 4 or 5 years since we made that decision. So it's actually been very easy to stay on track. Where I have had problems with deviating in the past, so before we had this specific focus, for about the 10 years before that, I was basically what you'd call a freelance editor. We did a bit of self-publishing, a little bit of this and that, but I was mostly just doing freelance editing. One thing I learned over that time, and now that we've got a specific focus, the more things you think you can do, the easier it is to be distracted. So people often think, the more skills I've got, the more clients I'll get, I'll be able to do anything. It's not actually always the best business approach, because then you do end up trying to do a little bit of everything and you don't focus on one thing, and it can be easy to head off in different directions, and maybe it's not the best way to go. So since we've, like say 4 or 5 years ago, really nailed down what we do to one specific thing, we haven't deviated even an inch from it. So it's actually been a very big help for us.
Yeah, great. And I know that lots of people want to write books. I'm just in the midst of writing one myself at the moment, but I still get a little confused to what does publishing mean. So can you just give someone who's listening here that's really keen to do their own book, what is publishing, Michael, and how would you be able to help them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people do get confused just specifically about what the term publishing is. So people sometimes think it means distributing the book. They sometimes think it means printing the book. The definition of the publisher is it's almost, I guess it's almost like a combination of kind of a movie director, if that helps people. It's the publisher is the person who makes the overall decision, the overall decisions on the book, manages the process, manages the costs, the budget, the schedule, that kind of thing. So the publisher is kind of the person who oversees the book. And they're also the person who makes the decision to produce it. So it's very much kind of the person who basically gets the book out into the world. So the authors that we work with these days are self-publishers. So what that means is after you've written the book, so it might take you 1, 2, 3, 4 months, whatever it is, to write your book. So at that point, you're just the author. Then what you do is you say, okay, I'm going to take on the role of publishing it myself. So what you're doing then is you're the one making the decisions on the cover design. You're the one on making the decisions on how many copies you should print, on whether you want to try and put it into bookstores, on whether you're going to put it on Amazon. All of those decisions are publishing decisions. Now, what we do, so people, this is again where sometimes people get confused when they come to us. People sometimes think that us, Michael Hanrahan Publishing, they sometimes think that we are the publisher. We are not the publisher. We are a publishing services business. So what we do is we provide you with the resources and the skills and the advice you need to produce your book, but you're still your own publisher. So the way I describe it to people is you might come to me and say, hey, I want a hot pink cover on my book. I might say that's a really terrible idea. But you say, no, I really want a hot pink cover on your book. And we'll say, okay, we'll put a hot pink cover on your book. You're the publisher. So with self-publishing, if you work with a company like us, you kind of get the best of both worlds in a way. You get to have all the good advice, but you also get to make the final decisions.
Great. And I'll ask 2 questions. So the first is, what's unique about the way that you do that versus some other people in the industry? That's the first question, and then I'll ask the second after that.
Yeah, no worries. So, what sets us apart is the key thing that sets us apart is the experience of our team. So, I've been working in this specific area of publishing for over 20 years. Our senior editor has been working in this area of publishing for years. Everybody on our team has in-house experience in one of the major publishers in Australia. And so how that sets us apart is if you come to us, we can produce a book to the exact same standards as a company like Penguin, Random House, any of the major, well, it's the same company these days, but we can produce a book to the same standard of any of the major publishers. So we believe that that's our key point of difference, and we really focus on that when we talk to authors. The other point of difference that we have from some of our competitors is we offer some distribution services that similar companies like us don't always offer. So we can offer bookshop distribution, which again, some similar companies don't offer. So that's another thing that we believe sets us apart.
Great. And the second question was around, going with someone like Penguin or Random House. I know they're one.
Yep.
Or self-publishing. Why do people choose one versus the other?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I get asked this question all the time. So the first thing to realize, there are some people who promote self-publishing services who really kind of almost demonize traditional publishing and criticize it and say it's terrible and all that kind of thing. I'm not going to do that. I'm never going to do that. Traditional publishing has its place. It's all about what you're individually trying to do with your book. So the advantages for the authors that we work with as self-publishing is that two of the major problems you're going to have going with a traditional publisher is, number one, just getting your foot in the door. Even if you've written a really good book, it can be hard to get picked up by Penguin and all those sorts of people. And if you do get picked up, it can then take 12, 18 months for your book to be produced. So that's two major hurdles for the small business author. They don't want to have to worry about getting picked up by somebody, and they want their book out quickly. So if you self-publish, you bring your book to a company like us, you don't have to worry about getting picked up. It's just you're just paying to have your book produced. And then the other advantage you've got is our standard turnaround time is about 3 months. So they're two very big advantages for the sorts of authors we work with.
Great, brilliant. And what's your number one source of getting new leads? You said you've got plenty of business, which is fantastic. Where does that come from?
We focus very, very much on business partnerships. We do zero marketing. I've done no marketing for 14 years, and I've been busy for 14 years. So we've got a number of writing coaches we work with. The business course that I mentioned a little while ago that I did, we actually kind of became unofficial partners with them because one of the things they do is they encourage people to write a book. So they send a lot of authors our way. We've got editors we know, we've got printers we know, we've got designers we know. All of that feeds into people coming back to us and wanting to get their books done. So the first thing most people do is if they're thinking, hey, I'm writing a book, and they think, oh, my friend Fred wrote a book, I'll give Fred a call and see who did his book. And then Fred says, hey, go to Michael Hanrahan Publishing. They were really good. So our existing authors are a very big source of work for us as well.
Yeah, great. And I think that's where it's, so important, as you said before, to really identify that ideal client, stick to that. And then I think it makes a lot easier for people to refer clients to you. So I think that makes perfect sense. And as far as your team, Michael, tell us a bit about your team. How big is it and where are people located?
Yep. So in-house, so on the actual official Michael Hanrahan Publishing team, we have 3 people. So we have myself, we have my partner Anna, and we have a senior editor, Charlotte. So Anna and I work from home. The front room of our house is the office. And Charlotte, she also works from home. She's our senior editor. So that's 3 people, 3 employees, basically. We also have a team of freelancers that we use as needed. So we've got 2 designers who we keep pretty busy. Basically, one's the cover designer and another one does interior designs for us. And we've got printers who we use. We've got one printer who does probably about 95% of our books. And then occasionally there'll be a project that they can't manage for whatever reason. There's specifications or something they can't do or something like that. So we've got a few other printers we use for particular different jobs. And then we've got a backup team of additional editors and designers and proofreaders who we use as needed. So at any one time, I'm kind of managing about 6 or 7 people who are at different stages of doing different things on our books.
Great. And do you do what your dad did, which is work crazy hours, or you're pretty good working for yourself at home?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a little bit of the crazy hours going on. I don't mind at all working into the evening. I genuinely love what I do, so it doesn't feel like a chore to me at all. It's one of the, we talk about the corporate escapee thing. It's one of the major differences running your own show is that when you put in the extra hours, you see the rewards. Whereas
Yes.
often when you're in corporate, you put in the extra hours and nobody even notices. So I don't mind putting in the extra hours. We roughly keep to a 9 to 5 schedule, but yeah, very much. When you're on a tight deadline, there might be a late night or a bit of Saturday morning work, something like that, which is absolutely fine. I think you'll find most small business owners do that.
Excellent. And what are some of the biggest challenges that you face in continuing to grow the business?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We're actually right in the middle of developing a new side of the business that's going to be launching in February next year. So where we're at right now, we've spent the last 3 years or so really focusing on our systems and getting the right people in the right place and making sure we're targeting the right authors and all this kind of thing. And we feel like we've got that down and it's working really well. Obviously, you can always make improvements, but we kind of feel like we've got our major systems in place. The only way to expand doing what we're doing now is by adding more people, which we're not that keen to do. We kind of like the size we've got now. It's working really well for us. So we're working on a new side of the business next year, which is it's actually going to be a whole new website. We're smack in the middle of development right now. We're working on a new website that's going to have training courses and consulting services and all sorts of things we can do to better leverage our time rather than just us selling our time for money. So that's the next step in the development of the business for us.
Great. And are you getting anyone to help you with that, Michael? Or are you doing that yourself, or a combination?
Combination, yeah. We got a business coach in at the start of the year to help us develop the direction of the business or the next step in the business. And we've got a business partner we're working with who he is simultaneously, it's one of the writing coaches I mentioned earlier, he's simultaneously developing his own website. So we're kind of working, together in that. We're giving him some content, he's giving us some content. We've hired some web people, obviously, to do the website. It's actually going to be quite a sophisticated website. So we're putting quite a bit of time and effort into that. And beyond that, we're developing the content, the actual content ourselves, but we're getting help with the production of the website.
Okay, excellent. Well, just before we move into the next section, I'd like to mention our 20,000 a month quiz, which helps corporate escapees, just like Michael, to assess their fitness for growth. You answer questions using a cool bot, and then you get a personalized report. All you need to do is go to buildlivegive.com and take the quiz today. So the next section, Michael, is the live section. So just talk about a couple of daily habits that help you be successful.
Yeah, so the first one is really probably the most important one for me is having a routine. I find that really, really important. I think the key to that is you can limit the number of decisions you have to make every day. So my routine's the same every morning. Get up at 6 o'clock. Come into the office, check my email, get organized for the day. It takes me about half an hour, 45 minutes. Go and walk the dog, come home, have breakfast, get back at my desk. I've got a very strict routine. So I find that really helps me focus just on the job. I don't have to every day think, what time am I going to get up? When should I walk the dog? What do I do after work? All that kind of thing. So I go to the gym on the same day every week. Go and see my mum on the same day every week. Everything's got a routine. So I find that really, really important. And that works really well for me. Now, having said that, like I mentioned before, sometimes your hours do get thrown out depending on the workload, but trying to have that routine in place as much as you can is very helpful. The next thing I find really helps me is taking a break when you really need it. So I find even just a 10-minute break, I often just go for a walk around the block. That really helps clear your head. So if I've been working on a particular task for a couple of hours and you've got your head really stuck in it, before you move on to the next thing, it really helps to just go out and clear your head a little bit. So that helps me a lot. Another thing I really kind of changed my approach to in the last couple of years, I guess, would be not looking for the, in inverted commas, work-life balance. What I really learnt with that was trying to get the work-life balance thing happening was actually stressing me out because I couldn't do it. It just wasn't working. If you're going to run your own show, you do to a large degree have to be on call when the business needs you. So it doesn't matter how well you plan your time, how well structured your business is, it's still going to take over sometimes. So what I found, I've heard people call it recently work-life integration, which I think is a lot better term. So the way I see it now is quite simply, I will work when I have to and I don't when I don't. So sometimes that does mean being at your desk at 2:00 in the morning. That doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. But other times it means, on a Friday morning, being down at a coffee shop with the dog at 10:00, having a coffee. So, so I find that really helps as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And Anna, you spoke about Anna a couple of times before, but when she listens to this, what would you like to say to her for the support she's given you through this journey?
I think just understanding just how important this is to me, and that it's not only is it the business, and I'm trying to work on it to obviously earn us money and provide a living and that kind of stuff, but just that I love what I do, and there are going to be times, like I say, when that does take over, and it is really, really important that your partner understands that. So for your listeners, if they are already working themselves or about to do it, this is a really important conversation to have with your family, that sometimes you will be at your desk at 2:00 in the morning, and if your partner's not ready for that or your family's not ready for that, you are going to have problems. So Anna and I have had those specific conversations, and she's got her own interests and her own things that she does that take up her time as well. So being on the same page with that is really, really important. And, she's fully supportive of that and just lets me do what I need to do.
Great. Well, the next section's the give section. So what's a cause or a community that you're passionate about and why?
Yeah, so I mentioned before, part of launching the new side of the business next year is we're going to start looking at working with the Aboriginal Literacy Foundation. So that has obvious ties into what we're doing. So part of launching the new side of the business for next year was we were looking around for some sort of charitable partner that we could work with. So we felt they tied in really well with what we're doing with the books. We don't have a regular charity we work with at the moment. We do donate regularly here and there, but we haven't got a kind of proper partnership with anyone at the moment. So that's something we are looking at doing next year.
Excellent. The last section is the action section, where I'll just ask you some questions and get some quick rapid fire responses. So the first one is, what's your top 3 productivity tips?
Yeah, so kind of mentioned this one before, but have a routine. That is just so important. Second one is have a system for checking your emails. It sounds kind of almost simplistic, but I looked really carefully at this about 6 months ago, because you just spend so much time on your emails. So work out a plan for when you check your emails, how you check them. You will save heaps of time. And the third one is don't multitask. Multitasking is just the biggest myth. All you do is do 2 things poorly and more slowly. It's just focus on doing one thing at a time. When you're really busy, turn your mobile phone off, turn the office phone off, put your email away, and just concentrate on one thing at a time.
Great. And what are some favourite apps or software that you use to run your business?
We've started using, about 2 years ago, we started using Xero, and it was one of the best things we ever did. It's the accounting app, which I presume most of your listeners will be familiar with. Others are obviously MYOB and all that kind of things, other cloud accounting apps. But that did 2 things. Number one, it just stopped me having to manually do the bookkeeping, which I just hated. But the other thing it does is it just saves you huge amounts of time. The bank feeds go straight into your software. You don't have to put anything in manually. Anna and I can both look at things together on our separate computers and, make decisions and that kind of thing. It's just a huge time saver. Other things we use Dropbox, which allows us to work with everybody in our team seamlessly. So, 10 years ago, you needed a server to do that, and small businesses just couldn't do it. Now you can do it for for, I don't know, $20 a month or whatever it is. So Dropbox is fantastic. Obviously, Google Drive is similar. Appointment Core is very handy. We have had people specifically sign up for us because they've said how easy our booking system was, and Appointment Core is part of our booking system. So that's definitely something people should look at. That's something that allows people to schedule time with you online, so they don't have to, you get that thing where you go back and forwards with 7 different emails. Are you available at 9 o'clock on Tuesday? No, I'm not. How about 4 o'clock on Thursday? No, I've got to pick up the kids. You can book in very easily. So that's a big help. And we also use just the Google suite of apps, which is Google Docs, Google Mail, all that kind of thing. Again, that allows us to have the connectivity that you really needed a big server to do 10 years ago. Now you can just do it with Google Apps. It's absolutely fantastic.
Brilliant. And I know this is probably going to be too difficult for you, so I won't ask you your favourite book and why, but what I'll do is change that to your favourite podcast and why.
Yeah. So I've been listening to the Business Over Breakfast podcast recently. So that's a really good podcast with it's Andrew Griffiths and Bree James. And I will declare a vested interest. We work with Andrew on a few things, but that's not why I'm recommending it. It is very, very good. Andrew's an excellent small business author, and it's got all sorts of really useful tips. So I've been working my way through that. Flying Solo is another really good podcast. I highly recommend Flying Solo for anybody who's, especially if you're just about to go out on your own. They've got podcasts, articles, great website. Their stuff's fantastic. So they're 2 podcasts I've been working my way through lately.
Excellent. And what's some parting advice, Michael, that you'd love to leave a corporate escapee listening to this right now?
Yeah, it's a simple one. Take action. It's just that simple. I look back now over the years, and the number of times I spent 2 or 3 months analyzing something, and you think about it and you talk to this, and you just take ages to make a decision, and you're sweating over trying to make the absolutely perfect decision. And it turns out the best thing to do would have been just start and figure out along the way as you go. So I've learned that lesson over and over again. I think I've learned it by now. Numerous times where just, you think, okay, I want to do this, but I'll do all my research first. Just go and talk to somebody about it. Start doing it. And even if what you do is wrong, someone will point you in the right direction, say, no, you're doing the wrong thing. Go over here and do that. So you go and do that. And then the next person will point you to the next step. So, especially if you're looking at going out on your own and you're really scared and nervous about it, there's never going to be a day where you wake up and the sun kind of pulls through the window and you just sit there and say, okay, today's the perfect day to start my business. It just won't happen. You're just going to have to make it happen at some point yourself. So just get out there and get started, and you'll learn the lessons you need as you go.
That's excellent advice. I think that's a great way to sum up a really excellent interview, Michael. We, on behalf of the broader small business community, I want to thank you for your support and getting a lot of great books. I think what's the saying? Everyone's got a great book, but not everyone gets it out of them.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, and I think you certainly help with that, and it's wonderful what you're doing for our community. If you want to find out more about Michael, just go to mhpublishing.com.au. We'll have links to all the great information that Michael's mentioned in the show notes as well. So, Michael, thanks a lot for coming on today.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
I really enjoyed that interview with Michael. So what were my 3 key takeouts? The first one is why access and speed is so much easier when you self-publish a book. The second is how to scale your business with no marketing. That's right, no marketing. Michael gives a great example of how he's done that over the last 5 years. And the third thing is, how do you achieve work-life integration? I think Michael sums that up beautifully. So I'd love to hear what you thought about this podcast. Please email me at paul@buildlivegive.com. Also, share this with anyone who you think would get benefit from. And if you haven't had the chance, please subscribe to the podcast so you can get a lot of other great interviews just like Michael's to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Corporate Escapees podcast, brought to you by the team at Build, Live, Give. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it with other corporate escapees. If you would like to join a community of like-minded peers, please visit www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening and be brave.